Good morning. This is Dr. Hansa Das, and I welcome you to my channel History with Hansa. Uh, I had started a series of videos on imperialism and colonialism, in which I had said that I'll talk about the theories of imperialism first, and then we'll look into how colonialism spread into India, how England colonized India and exploited India both economically and politically. I have posted videos on the theories of imperialism, which have been divided into three parts. The first one is on the liberal theories of imperialism, second one is on Marxist, and third is on the non-Marxist theories of imperialism. After having studied imperialism in great detail, we come to colonialism and the manner in which England colonized India and exploited her. So, the first section in this series of colonialism and how England colonized India. The first section is commercialization of agriculture. How through commercialization of agriculture, England served her own interests at the cost of India. So in this video, we are going to talk about the commercialization of agriculture, the various aspects related to it, and what it ultimately resulted into. Let us begin. Commercialization of agriculture for a very long time was viewed in general by economists as a means by which, number one, specialization in agriculture increased, and number two, productivity increased. So, in a broader framework, it was a principal element in the transition from pre-capitalist to capitalist modes of production. When we move on from a capitalist to a when we move on from a pre-capitalist to a capitalist modes of production, these differences or these advancements take place in agriculture as well. Now, let us look into the pre-British scenario of agriculture before we move into how the Britishers commercialized agriculture. Let us look into what was the state of agriculture before the British came to India. Now, social and economic historians have taken much more interest in agrarian system and the commercialization of agriculture. Let us see how they viewed agriculture. According to them, crops like cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane were grown even before the advent of British because land revenue had to be paid mostly in cash. And also, prices of cash crops were greater than prices of food grains. So they say that even before the advent of the British in India, these crops, which we know as the cash crops, they were grown in India as well, like cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane. But commercialization of agriculture at that time corresponded to the requirements of a traditional revenue economy, in which the main form of revenue was a mixture of tax, tribute, and land rent. Land was available in abundance, and the dominant elements in land had a privileged position in the system of revenue collection. This was the pre-British scenario. So they appropriated a part of surplus from the peasants, and used this to pay for wage labor. So the power of command and custom in the traditional society was responsible for the economic differentiation within the peasantry. Now, agricultural produce had to be marketed in order to pay land revenue in cash, but the difficulty was that the agricultural surpluses so generated did not lead to a flow of goods and services back to agriculture. The Nawabs and Zamindars wasted it, and so the benefits from trade did not go to those engaged in agriculture. Now let us look into the British scenario. What happened to agriculture and commercialization after the British came to India? Now when the British came to India, the situation somewhat changed because now the primary concern of the rulers was expansion of commerce. And so market forces were introduced into agriculture on a very large scale. So changes came about in the agricultural scenario after coming of the British. Now, what were the effects of the British advent and the British indulgence into agriculture? The first effect was that land became marketable and it also acquired considerable commercial value. The second effect was that opportunities for trade in agricultural produce increased. And thirdly, The inflow of finance from outside the agrarian society came from urban traders, money lenders, and also from those who wanted rental income from landed property. The results were that along with the market for agricultural produce, land, credit, and labor markets also developed. So, in addition to land revenue, a large part of agricultural income was appropriated as rent, interest, and profit. Land, credit, and labor markets were created, so agricultural income was appropriated as rent, interest, and profit. Now, there are several studies relating to this period which talk about the basic results of this British indulgence into agriculture. First of all, the customary relations and conventions which are prevalent within the village society that broke down. Then transfers in land through sale, mortgage, and leasing took place. And also there was increase in rural indebtedness. We'll do a separate video on rural indebtedness also. Um another result was a forced sale of produce, plus peasants were being evicted from land, and also there were changes in contractual arrangements with labor. Now we come to a case study by Amit Bhadari in which he has compared how commercialization of agriculture took place in eastern and western Uttar Pradesh, and he tries to explain the difference between the agricultural performance of eastern and western Uttar Pradesh on the basis of the agrarian social history of these regions. And the basic hypothesis is related to the nature of commercialization and its effects on agrarian class relations. But before we do that, there are certain assumptions which he has made. First of all, commercialization cannot be captured by any single statistical index. It is not just a shift in favor of cash crops, and neither is it just an increase in monetary transactions in an agrarian economy. So, these are some of the assumptions which he makes before trying to compare Eastern and Western UP. The reason why these assumptions are made the reasons why these assumptions are made are: the first thing is that the process involves several agricultural markets like product, land, credit, labor, and there can be contradictions in these markets. And also the mechanism underlying commercialization may be different in different historical situations. It could be normal or forced commercialization. So before we begin to study the differences between eastern and western UP, as Amit Bhadari has outlined, it is necessary to study what normal commercialization is and what forced commercialization is. So, what is normal commercialization? In normal commercialization, a growing amount of surplus output is marketed, and it does not matter whether the surplus is in the form of a cash crop or a subsistence crop. What is important is that the increased volume of marketed agricultural produce is the result of increased production over self consumption. So, rich agriculturists and progressive landlords increase their production and thus generate surplus. This is what happens in normal commercialization. What happens in forced commercialization? In forced commercialization, peasants are forced to sell a high proportion of their output, mainly because of increasing cash requirements, usually debt. And this forces them to buy again from the market, which leads to distress buying and selling. The method of extracting surplus involves involuntary market involvement of the peasants, which leads to increased revenue or rent and consequently indebtedness. So traders and money lenders become powerful in this kind of a system. Now, let us see what was the condition of Eastern UP during that time, as has been outlined by Amit Bhaduri. First of all, in Eastern UP, there was a kind of a permanent zamindari system in which the zamindars or the talukdars were typically large landlords. They had to pay a permanently fixed land revenue in cash by a given date to the colonial administration. Now, this line is very important. Please look into the importance of each word of the sentence. They had to pay a permanently fixed land revenue in cash by a given date to the colonial administration, and in return they could collect rent from cultivators settled on their land. So income of the zamindar was equal to land rent collected minus land revenue paid. Uh, Side by side, the zamindars could also evict the peasants in case of default, and then the zamindars also began to sublease out land on a large scale. Subleasing was done by members of extended family or moneylenders and traders, and this also led to a complex system of subimputation. Now, what happened in Western UP? Western UP, there was more of a kind of a Rayatwari settlement instead of a permanent zamindari settlement, where the settlement of revenue was temporary, and the colonial administration could revise the revenue claims every 20 to 30 years. In this system, a class of well-off tenants, relatively well-off tenants, emerged, whose occupancy rights were recognized by the state, and these tenants had a direct involvement in agriculture. Uh, Since the 1830s, the situation changed in both Eastern UP and Western UP. In Eastern UP, since the 1830s, we see the increase in the position of the superior tenure holders who were mere rent receivers with no direct involvement in agriculture. While since the 1830s in Western UP, occupancy tenants emerged as relatively secure and prosperous agriculture. So this was the change which happened since 1830s in Eastern and Western UP. What was the post-independence scenario? In the post-independence period, in Eastern UP, money lenders and traders became owners of land, whereas in Western UP, occupancy tenants became owners. Uh, After independence, when zamindari abolition took place, then again we find changes in Eastern UP and Western UP's condition. In Eastern UP, the older mix between normal and forced commercialization was left undisturbed. Perhaps when traders and moneylenders secured land titles, forced commercialization becomes stronger in Eastern UP, and peasant proprietors failed to become a strong independent economic class. There is low productive income and there is more unproductive income. In Western UP, on the other hand, after zamindari abolition, peasant proprietors emerged on a large scale. There was more productive income and there was less reliance on forced commercialization. While in Eastern UP, we find that forced commercialization had a kind of forced commercialization had been imposed. So finally, we could say that variations in agricultural performance of both regions could be seen, and this may be linked to the complex process of commercialization in agriculture. So we have seen the pre-British scenario, the manner in which cash crops were traded and what happened after the British came to India, and then we have seen a comparison of the cases of Eastern and Western UP as outlined by Amit Bhaduri, and we have seen the changes or the differences between them in since 1830s. Then we have seen in the post independence period after zamindari abolition act. So hope you liked an analysis of the commercialization of agriculture presented in this video. Please put your comments in the comment box, and if you like the video, please share it and also subscribe it. We will come up with our next video, which will be on rural indebtedness, deindustrialization, drain of wealth, and the colonial nature of Indian economy. Subsequently, we'll be doing all these videos. Thank you very much.